Welcome to Drupal Nights. Tonight we have Ben Melançon talking about web services in Drupal 8, in Drupal for 7 years, and he's also a contributing author and organizer of the wonderful A-Press book, The Definitive Guide to Drupal 7.
All right. Sorry, my name is Ben Melançon. I'm with Agaric, which is a Drupal collective. We Boston-ish area, co-founder in Hamburg, and that is not what I see.
Here we go.
Staying this time?
Yes.
All right.
Take about 2 steps back.
Much better. All right, so I get to be in the camera. All right, sorry about that. All right, it's my first time presenting here. I should have observed more closely what Kenny was doing when he presented, but I was just taking notes the whole time. I wasn't really looking at the speaker. So this will be on YouTube. Hey, everybody who watches this later. I'm very proud to be at BioRAFT presenting on how you can power your own APIs with Drupal 8. So the big new thing in Drupal 8 is RESTful APIs. And what's interesting is that the entire web is actually built on REST principles, going all the way back to the GeoCities days. So the idea of having machine-readable and machine-communicatable information on your websites is an awesome thing. This is the idea behind RDF. It's an ideal that's never been completely realized, but the idea is that the more information is available in a format machines can understand, the more cool things we can do with the web. Obviously, machines can understand a lot of things that aren't meant explicitly for them. That's how Google gets you good search results. That's how the NSA figures out who's talking to whom. So you can ask the NSA about machine understanding things, except they don't tend to answer questions. They just very nosy. But all the ability for other machines, your other servers, other things serving websites to read things from other your website or anyone else's website has been around quite a while also. And Drupal was with it from, I think, the very beginning. I meant to go back and look up when the first RSS feed was put in, but it was like right in the very beginning. Like, and there was even something other competitor to RSS that Drupal had like right away, and that one didn't pan out, and so Drupal went with RSS. And that's part of what's made Drupal like such a good citizen of the web. And so RSS, for anyone who doesn't know, is the ability to output your posts, generally a stream of posts from your website in a form that can be understood. So it's actually done in XML, and it defines what is the title, what is the body, who is the author, when the date was published, and so another website can read it in and put those things in the right place. And can even, you can get a different RSS feed for different types of things. So again, Drupal's done this from the beginning, both incoming and outgoing. So an example of this that you should be familiar with is the Drupal Planet. And really, if you're not familiar with it, go to drupal.org/planet because it's a great thing to learn about Drupal in general, and it's entirely using RSS. Everyone who's got a Drupal site, or some Drupal developers with WordPress sites, can create an RSS feed with a specific one for the planet. It's not everything they put out there. They make a content type, or they make a tag rather, called Drupal Planet, and tell the Drupal Planet what tag they're using. it's not a I'm going to talk a little more about this later, but the holy grail of machine understanding is standards, and that's where we never quite get to standards to understand things. So there's no way that you could just, no easy way for you to just take your machine and scan all the sites out there for ones with a Drupal Planet feed. Instead, people who have a Drupal Planet feed have submitted to the maintainers on Drupal.org that they'd like it added, and that specific feed, which is usually mysite.com/taxonomy/term/1 or 73 or whatever, and that's really that's machine readable, but it doesn't mean anything without the context that a human has provided it. But still, it's a great thing. It allows the Drupal Planet to aggregate all this specific content the Drupal Planet feeds from these other sites, from all the sites that they find interesting. The ability to create machine understandable content has been with Drupal for a very, very long time. But it's not using REST, and so what REST is a nice, very calming type of term, but it stands for a representation of state transfer, and it is an architectural style that could be applied to anything, but primarily applies to the web, to using the HTTP, the Hypertext Transfer Protocol, to communicate things to very specific things. Again, so it's a style. So just to take a step back, it's the same as Impressionism here is a style that's marked by using larger globs of paint to give an impression of a scene. The same way, REST is an architectural style that's very well suited for a distributed network like the web is. And it was, lots and lots of thought went into this whole system for the web. And Roy Fielding's thesis describes, this is a famous thesis that defines what REST is. And the point is, so REST APIs are sort of a hot topic, but the concepts of REST are what built the web. And what those concepts are, this architectural style, is a constraint of a limited number of what they call verbs, so that you can get a web page. It's mostly what you do when you're browsing around. You can post to a web page as a resource, like anything is a resource. So there's a whole set of resources. The image is a resource, the website is a resource, anything at a URL is a resource. And then you can post to a specific resource, the form submission, which you've all done on the website, that's using REST. And then there's less commonly used verbs, but to put or patch and to delete. And that's the ones that are really used. And this has a lot of advantages for the whole network and for your specific application. One of the big ones is that in your logs, you know exactly what's going on. You can see when someone's visiting and when someone's interacting and when someone's deleting. It's a standard that's working. That's one constraint for this REST architectural style, and we'll get to more as we go into the Drupal thing specifically. So that was sort of the broad thing. We have the idea that machines being able to talk to each other is awesome. We have the fact that the whole web is built on the REST principles. So it would be really smart to do your web services in a RESTful manner. And what you can do with REST services, which don't have to be REST. There's web services that aren't REST. SOAP is a big one. RPC XML, which has actually been also in Drupal core for forever, is one. But again, for the reasons I started to allude to, REST is simply better. It's the way the web should work. It is a very sort of a coarse-grained API application. API stands for, I'm blanking on this. Application programming interface, right? Yeah. So it's a little strange to talk about that on the web. It's usually, but it sort of does make sense. You go to a resource, you ask for a set of information, and you have the knowledge that you can use to then post things. And it's very coarse. Like, you have a resource, and the resource then contains, ideally, the hypermedia links. The same way you have links on a web page, a proper RESTful API will have hypermedia, will have a concept of links in the resource that's that you request with the GET request, that will tell you how to post to it, how to edit it rather, and how to do a patch or a put request, and how to delete it. All of those are done as links. Well, that you actually would just know from the resource itself, but you could have a related resources, so how you would find the author of it, how you could edit something associated with it. So the rest is better. It's done the way the web is. And so we're putting these together in Drupal and making RESTful web services a first-class citizen of Drupal 8. And again, taking a step back, what you can do with web services are things like a mobile phone app, and yeah, what's listed here. Just explanation for the last one there. It's Kimono Labs is a pretty cool service that basically can turn any website into a REST API. So you just go there, you look at the text that you can read, and you select it, and it tries to turn it into something that machines can easily read. And so if you have anything on your site where someone might do something like that, you really should be exposing it to people as an easy-to-access RESTful web service right away. And so it'll be interesting to watch what people do with stuff like Kimono Labs, and then you'll get more of a sense like, oh, I actually putting some information on my site that should be done in a RESTful manner. So again, the holy grail is standards that people actually understand. So if you're, say you have a series of events that you're putting on your site, you can expose them in a RESTful manner, marked as events, like linked in some way to this other resource that's a concept of events. Again, that's the idea behind RDF, the Resource Description Framework, but it's never caught on fully in anything in sort of this really universal way of understanding what the machine machines are saying. So again, that's the ultimate goal. Is you can just put out an API, and machine can go to it and not only link to all parts of that API. That's the one height of the idea of REST. It's called hypermedia is HATEOS. Hypermedia as the I'm kind of blank on all the acronyms now, but it's hypermedia as the representation of the current application state, and that is the ability for once you just have the very beginning of the API, you can understand the whole thing. That's something that most REST APIs don't do, but to be a truly RESTful API, things should do that. And then if that API that you navigate then is defined in sort of general concepts, like this is an event, this is something else that all machines can reference and understand, then this is a feature we don't have yet, but Drupal being so large and we having at least the base of the standard out there, there's again the potential that these kinds of standards would emerge, the same way that it took years for HTML itself to become standardized in solid ways and widely supported. But the idea that you could just go looking for all kinds of sites that have APIs, collect their events, and say, oh, I know it's an event because if the machine is clearly stating it's an event, it's referring to some other resource that's what we understand as an event, and I can see who is the speaker at this event. I can see when it is, and then so you can have a machine aggregate all these things into one spot. And that's just on the reading side, and then you should be able to then create services out there, the client side, that can interact and post back to your REST API. And so Drupal has the fundamentals for all of this in there. The emerging standards haven't come, and that's not something Drupal can do on its own. But again, you don't need all of that to just use these same modules and a subset of the principles of REST to create a mobile app or a front-end backbone application to talk to your Drupal site. And there's a lot of advantages there. It's sort of the way the web is moving now. Instead of just generating pages, you can generate a whole bunch of discrete resources. And Larry Garfield has a post on this that's linked to. I have a ton of links in the link that I'll give you at the end. The idea that each block in Drupal is going to be a resource now, and so instead of just having like a page as the one resource, all the things that make up the page, the user, the image, of course, the specific, a bunch of entities linked together can all be accessed discretely, and a REST API is a perfect way to do that. And so I want to give a big shout out. There's other people involved, but Lynn Clark and Klaus Purr have really been leading this effort, and they've also done some good presentations on this. You can look for it from the last 2 DrupalCons, and I'm sure coming up in Austin they'll have another with the latest that's happening. And they're both on the service called GitTip. If you ever heard of it, it's really cool. It's basically you make anonymous donations to people you think are doing good work, and it takes on a weekly basis. And most people like regifting their stuff to more people doing work. It's an interesting economy. But yeah, that's Lynn Clark and Klausi on most things, Drupal.org and GitTip. So the modules that are in Drupal 8 core that make all of this possible is the REST module for RESTful web services. Again, it's called the REST module, but more correctly, we're talking about RESTful web services. REST is what the whole web is doing, and what we're doing is allowing RESTful web services. A separate serialization module, which is awesome. So there are different formats. JSON is the format that most people like when doing REST, but you can still do XML and other formats that you can make and define. And so even JSON itself, which is just the JavaScript object notation, just a nice, easy way to represent objects in JavaScript, can be extended with more things. So the HAL module, the HAL module, which again is, I don't think, intended to reference any scary futuristic 2001: Space Odyssey or anything, but it's an attempt to do what I'm talking about, is providing this sort of universal structure for marking things up. It is not widely adopted yet. It looks promising, but Drupal 8 is going like, all right, we're betting on this horse, and it will help it win. And it's another great step for Drupal. Again, like Drupal did that with RDF. It helps your search engine rankings, but we didn't quite reach the world of easily machine-readable content, understandable everywhere. This is a second bet, and I hope it works even better. And that we get that world where websites can talk to each other really well. And the HTTP basic authentication module, if you've ever gone to a website and had that ugly pop-up screen, this is that kind of authentication. You probably will want to get the OAuth 2 authentication, which is already in contrib and functioning. So that's swappable. You can use any kind of authentication. You can add to the serialization. And what I was trying to say is that the HAL module extends this. So the serialization includes the JSON serialization. So I go to my Drupal site. There's an entity on there, a node or a user or something, and I'd like to get it in machine-readable format. If you've enabled these modules, you can just grab it, you can pull it down, and you can have it in JSON or in XML, depending on what accept headers you send. This is okay. Good. Yes.
Ben, how much of this is not available in 7?
none of it's built in 7, and none of it's done particularly easily in 7. So it's really almost impossible to do it truly RESTful in 7. So in 7, you basically had to do what a lot of things do, is like add a .json or .xml to your format to get it to your, so it's like I go to node1.json, and that violates the principle that there is this resource, and it is at /node/1. And if I want it in HTML, I just go to node/node/1, sending what your browser does, an accept header of HTML. So you can, sort of, if you look behind the scenes at what your browser is doing, this is how the web works. It is asking it for it's sending an accept header of HTML. If you send an accept header of application type JSON, JavaScript, you should get it in JSON. If you send it with an application type XML, you should get an XML. And that's what this has. In Drupal 7, due to limitations in Drupal's routing system, you couldn't do that. Now we are on Symfony's routing system, the Symfony kernel, and all of this stuff is possible. So that's, you can hack together everything else, you can do it, but you couldn't actually make it truly RESTful. And I don't know if things like the how module are even backported to 7, probably not. Drupal 8 allowed a whole new awesome way to do this. I mean, this is very much the idea of using the Symfony kernel, is because it already got this stuff right, and we could build on it so that we could also do this right and provide these web services. And yeah, so like I said, there's other ways of doing these protocols, and just, we picked REST, and everybody is picking REST. SOAP is in red, and it's shrinking. And there's multiple sources where that's the way. So SOAP is a lot more complicated as far as what you need to understand. REST is the only one that has actually the potential of having a service that doesn't already know the client. So again, just to go back what I was saying, like, yeah, I can make my mobile app talk to my Drupal website. That's great. I mean, I could do that with SOAP too. But there's pretty much no way that someone else could make a mobile app to talk to my SOAP website and another SOAP website. It'd have to be built specifically for that SOAP website, because it's just so complex. It's exposing a very internal, fine-grained API. Not possible, and if Drupal had gone SOAP, then you could at least talk to all the Drupal websites, probably through SOAP. But REST really lays out these clear, simple principles, limited number of HTTP verbs to take actions on resources. Resources are what define things, and so it's it's the principle of the web. It's much more scalable, and so it's nice to see it using out. I have no idea what JavaScript means in this context, but it was on multiple sources. JavaScript is, I don't know. Drupal is not just a provider of these REST endpoints, REST resources, RESTful web services, rather. It's also a client of them. It has a backbone.json core, which is replacing sort of all these funky, very custom AJAX things we had going on to, say, like autocomplete tags and stuff like that. Now, when you use when you're at a Drupal node and you're adding tags to it, it is talking to a RESTful web service on your own Drupal site, and it is, it's just going to the taxonomy resource and getting things based on the vocabulary that is also passed in. And yeah, you don't notice it on the user end, but if you want to then do more things with the ability to get vocabularies, you can. And you can even say, oh, I'm going to give another site permission to access my vocabulary. And yeah, not quite sure where to go with that. One slide. Back to Hal again. The holy grail is standards that not just your own site can talk to, but everything can do. So we have another one with Hal.
Trying to get it to force refocus. There it goes. Beautiful.
Force refresh.
Refocus.
Refocus.
Yeah, it went blurry for a second, but that was great.
Yeah, this is worth looking. Anyhow, XKCD, you can find it. A gotcha when configuring. Like I said, if you give someone permission to access your REST API, Drupal 8's done something which I think is pretty weird, which is you not only need to say that anonymous users can visit your node, and you also need to give them permission to access it in specific formats. So it's, in addition to enabling the REST module, you then need to go in and configure, and this is a series of doors, like each one locked after the other. That's the image I was going for there. Anyway, all completely unreadable. But it's natural. This is Drupal's permissions page. You know you're not going to be able to zoom in close enough to read anything on this page. But what it says is that you have to say access get on content resource. And if you want to give a specific role to ability to post to create a node, you can give that permission to access the deleted road, access the patched road. And you need this, and then you also need to enable the usual create, edit, delete node capabilities. That covers them all, right? Yeah. So you need, yes.
So we'll do a full access check if the user actually has access to the node, and then also via REST services.
So the authentication is pretty cool. Is one of the things that having Drupal as your REST server is really awesome instead of setting one up in Symfony itself or some other framework. Is that you've got all this great user management capability, and so if you want to give people access. You've got the whole permission system at your power. You've got the ability for people to register on your site. So someone can register on your site, and ultimately with OAuth module get application credentials in order to sign up for your site. So you can pretty easily be as cool as any web service you might use. And I don't know who has, but about Drupal going to this modern web, there's web services for all kinds of things. Like you probably, if you've enabled Mollum, you've gotten their access keys, and Drupal talks to Mollum through web service. If all kinds of things like that. I had one more thing to say to your question, but I forgot it. These are the 4 modules that you have to enable. Currently, do not try to enable all 4 at once. But I'm sure that will be worked out soon. I actually, the live demo is not going to happen today. I updated to the latest alpha release of Drupal 8, and nothing is working. I was so excited. Hey, get back there. That's very rude. All right, but this is how you get a specific node through curl, and it's cool because you get to see that and you do this in your terminal on your own Drupal site, and you get a really quick result of your node in JSON form. And you can see how clear everything is. There's the title, there's the author, all of that. Which I do not apparently successfully pasted in the results to it. So everything and more from the talk will be linked.
Sorry about that. It keeps deciding not to be focused. I'm not sure why. And it's perfect now.
Taking my cue. We link here right now. This page is pretty sloppy, but it's going to have everything laid out So I somewhat add, but good time for questions. Anyone come here with a specific type of web service they wanted to offer, or anything like that?
I'm more curious about the limitations in 7 versus the promise in 8. Like if I'm making a decision right now, oh, I can build a 7 site or an 8 site, and this was my end goal, was to have RESTful web services.
It's not even close. Just go for 8. It's not even close on this. Yeah. Yeah. There's a backbone module in 7 that's not particularly well maintained. You're basically completely on your own writing this yourself. And you can, like, this is what you. Again, this is what I mean. You basically have to write your own API. If you weren't using Drupal, you'd have to do all of this stuff. Drupal is pretty amazing in what it will offer, and so the next thing that again there is. I mean, basically, the authors, the people who made all the stuff work for this in 7, have been spending all of their time for the last 2 years making it happen in 8. So like the development of 7 modules have dropped off. Like people who are into this have moved on to 8. So there is the REST WS module that Clossie did that again has some minor limitations. But when you want, so the cool thing that Drupal 8 also has views in core. Views works with web services. So when you want to provide a collection of items, which is you generally don't want to get a specific node. Like if you already knew the node ID, you probably know enough information about the node that you don't need to get it. But you do need to get a whole collection of nodes, or a whole collection of any other entity you create. But content types are the easiest still in Drupal 8. You create your view, and I can bring up code for that. And you have the resource for the collection, which is what you need. Like Backbone is heavily collection dependent. Like you always want to be querying this the service to get new information from the resource. And it's similar to the RSS feed idea, but this lets you be a lot more specific and lets you also post things to it. The two-directional thing is way better in Drupal 8. All of the Symfony components that do this really well, the serialization is just vastly better in Drupal 8. And so the ability to go 2 ways for you to post. So the Guzzle library, which has been spun off from Symfony, is another thing you can grab with Composer and play with right now without doing Drupal 8. So there's a lot of stuff you can play with. You can download Composer. You can download Guzzle with Composer and use it to consume. It's the consumer of web services, the client side. And so that's built into Drupal 8. So it's much easier for 2 Drupal 8 sites to talk to each other. Backbone, of course, you can easily add on Drupal 7 yourself. So it's not a huge deal that it's included in Drupal 8. But it's sort of a huge deal that Backbone's included in Drupal 8 because the best practices for how you make basically the idea of Backbone and other these front-end JavaScript libraries is you may never theme your Drupal 8 site really. Again, the Drupal 8 site is this REST web service, and your front end in highly dynamic JavaScript grabs the information it needs. And you can use Twig.js so that if you do templating in Drupal 8's new Twig system, you can basically reuse the same templates. Not 100% yet, but pretty close. Like you don't have to like completely theme. Like, okay, here's my initial HTML, load to the view so it's quick, and then here's my regeneration of it in Backbone so it's dynamic. You can use similar templates. So yeah, Drupal 8 I hope gets stable enough to build things on really quick. It's not quite there, but it's coming quickly.
I don't know anything about mobile app development, but now that technically all my data is available in machine-readable format, is it very easy to go, ooh, there it is I now have a web app. It's my website.
Not that easy to make web apps period. But if you're looking for something simple, PhoneGap, Cordova, Apache, it's an Apache product now called Cordova, but the company is behind it is now Adobe. But PhoneGap allows you to basically use a backbone application, the same one that would power your mobile or highly dynamic website, and use that to produce the HTML and JavaScript for an app. It basically wraps your web app in the browser in your phones. It makes it into an app, and that's all people really care about. Like a lot of people try to say, oh, there's a difference in feel from a mobile website and an app, but those are sort of the connoisseurs. For most people, it's like if it is an icon on here, it is an app, and so PhoneGap handles that for you. And if you are pretty careful and good with the JavaScript framework you're using, which Backbone is a good one. Unfortunately, jQuery Mobile does not work very well on phones. That may change, but like the really simple way to make a mobile website and then stick it in the phone generally gives sort of poor performance. So it's still not easy to make a mobile app, but this makes it a lot easier, and you can essentially reuse so much of your code. There are people who use PhoneGap seriously, and they can reuse like 90% of their code from their website, which is also presenting all of this information using Backbone. They can reuse 90% of the code when they create the mobile app, which is huge, and and then they can make a tablet version reusing even more of the website code. So it's still serious development. It's not going to be done for you, but it's there. And we should see a lot more people, because Drupal's a large community, a lot more people creating those kinds of apps that know how to talk to Drupal. I mean, for the cons, people have created apps that talk to Drupal websites, so you can see your schedule on there. And that kind of, oh, I can make an app that can at least get data from a Drupal website should happen a lot more. So the next big things are really the fact that Drupal views is in the core and it has basic REST built in. You make whatever view you want. So you build your API in your Drupal site. Like no more having to sort of have a whole separate custom code to write your API. You can just configure your API the same way you configure the rest of your site and just enable it. So that's the biggest thing for the idea of just providing web services to anyone out there who wants it, and to having your sites communicate in this richer way, and giving your sites the ability to have one site. So this idea of, again, REST is the principle of the web. The idea that you're decoupling things, that you don't have to download the equivalent of a Word document to view a web page. It's getting the image from there. It's getting this from there. Like, it doesn't actually care if they're on the same server. As long as someone doesn't block it, you can hotlink an image from anywhere, and you have a web page that looks like a single thing to the person who receives it. The same way, this revolution in RESTful web services being everywhere. You have big sites that are having their comments powered by Discus or something. Like you have web services providing all different parts of your site, and this allows Drupal to play in that game in a much deeper way as both a provider and a consumer. And so it allows you to have two websites where you don't. So again, the decoupling is awesome because you don't have to upgrade everything at the same time. This is a RESTful web service. It is an API. It is, as long as you don't change that, which you should be able to maintain on an upgrade, you don't have to keep them. You don't have to upgrade everything at once. These are separate entities that can talk to each other. So you can have what I'm building is a list of domain names that I've registered and not done anything with on one site, and that doesn't have to be built into the data.agaric site. It doesn't have to be built into the agaric.com site. It exists as its own thing, a very focused, single-purpose, site and web service, and it can expose these domains to any other sites they want, potentially other people's sites also if they want to play in the same sandbox. And I can set up permissions so that you can even post from specific other sites to that service. And so this whole decoupling of services allows us to say, to stop making these giant sites that do everything. And Drupal's great at that, at doing everything and putting it in one spot. But it creates this sort of, oh my God, it's a Drupal 5 site, and it's going to cost more than it cost to create it originally to upgrade it to modern version of Drupal. And so it allows us to start putting the complex things in its own, in its the Unix philosophy. One tool for each thing. We can now start doing for websites much more. You can get your block on your web page from another site that's keeping that data to provide in that block, and interact with it really well. Whereas I've been involved with lots of places that want to do this, and you're basically using views to create an RSS, an XML feed, and then you're using feeds input to try to bring it in, and it's a mess. And then when people actually want to push data the other way, you come up with a whole other set of solutions. And this is going to, practically out of the box, provide all of that.
Is that because there's no direct access to entities, so you're going through views, you're going through all of these other pieces, or is that just fundamentally because there really wasn't this idea of separate pieces, etc.? I mean, I'm trying to understand why it took so long to get to this point.
Yeah, it's mostly I think really on the routing. It's partly okay. So it's partly on the routing layer, just being able to create. Have a Drupal site that can accept the post that's not embedded in the page context, but take it from anywhere. And I think it was, it's REST is an architectural style that makes this stuff work. And so not having all of the pieces to do REST as a whole meant that no one was making the individual pieces possible, because it's perfectly possible to write your own API to accept information from another place, but you'd have to say, okay, what format's going to be in, what's all of this. Now, bang, Drupal has settled on JSON with the HAL extension. So HAL adds the hypermedia aspect of this, which is what you need to be truly REST. There's layers of REST, and the height of it is, again, where you not just are using these limited set of verbs, you're not just you resources at specific points. And to make that clear, you don't go to URL like Drupal does now, ideally you would not do it on the web search layer. You wouldn't go to URL that says go to node add. You just go to URL that says node and make a post request. And in your post request, you provide the data that says the type of node, all the data you want to add. And because you're at the node resource, Drupal knows that you want to create a node, and you can add information like the content type, which is done, coming back to HAL, as a link basically to Drupal's reference for what a content type is. So built into Drupal right now is not just everything I said, but the sort of a REST API for Drupal concepts like content type. And so when you do a post, and I thought I had an example of that in here, but I think it's on that slide that ended up blank. Oh well. his notes. It's Stefan's opinionated notes. Let's see if I can get just the part that matters. I'm a compulsive note taker. So let's see, is that? Yeah. So again, let me get this all by itself, and well, it's not right there, but all right, put it on top of the screen at least. So we may not be able to read there, but so we're saying that so making a post request, we're giving our user credentials in not the best way, but this is what Drupal has in core. You have to get HTTP auth so that you're doing it with tokens and not sending your password every time. And as long as you set it up with SSL, you're pretty good. And then the header information for this post request is that our content type that we are sending is HAL JSON. And HAL JSON has this concept of a links array in it. And so in that links array, we can give a type. And the URL for that type is REST, which is whatever. We can live with that. But type, so Drupal's content type, node, and then specific content type I created called domain. And this is metadata. HAL is just it's standard JSON, but with additional metadata that can communicate things. And so that's why Drupal had to sort of pick a standard. And so instead of making up their own, they created they just decided to get on the HAL bandwagon. And it's pretty straightforward. And the thing is, right now, like GitHub provides JSON. It has a links concept, but not quite the same as HAL. It's not every single major site vendor currently sort of has their own implementation, and hopefully HAL is going to become that standard. So again, it's got the concept of node type, and then you can add in the title, and you can add, of course, the body and every other field you have, and Drupal is going to receive this, deserialize it, and make a node out of it. And then the key thing is that it's going to be just node. Its entity is going to be dropped, but for I thought it was supposed to be removed in the latest one, which is why I updated, but I can't get it to work either way now. But it's the resource is a node, and this is all the information we're sending, and we can create.
So right now in D7, you would essentially go to node add / content type, which in this case would be domain.
Yeah.
So if you were as a user, we're going to go to add one, you'd go to /node /add /domain, and then you'd end up on a form.
Yeah.
So this is really just sort of shorthand to tell HAL, start as a node, go to that particular content type, and here's the information to put in.
The idea is that Drupal has this unitary concept of node, so that it so the main thing is if you did say node / domain in this part of the URL, that could still be RESTful. But what you can't do is you can't go node /add. Like add is the verb, and the whole idea of REST is that the URL is always a resource that you act on. And this is just it's just a style like impressionism. It's a constraint that you accept in order to have a better result and to play better with others. So I guess that's a real key takeaway, to just understand what makes something RESTful and why we do it. Again, it's like now whenever it's interacting with node and the resource and what they're doing, whether it's a GET request, a POST request like this, delete request, or what Drupal uses instead of PUT is which is more common, it's using patch. And I honestly have not fully followed the technical reasons why we're using the more obscure verb patch, but it maps better to what Drupal does when you update, when you edit a node. Yeah. Yes, Leslie.
How does it handle revisioning of the web services, or versioning of the web services? I'm sorry. So I'm used to SOAP web services from long ago. So what used to happen was, say your content type has a new parameter that you want to pass. I'm consuming your web service using 2 parameters. Now, Bridget wants to consume it using the 3 parameters. How does Drupal handle that?
So the ideal, which Hal is the beginning of the building blocks to make possible, is that you've got all the hypermedia in there. That like the whole idea behind like the end goal of RESTful web services is that you've got this one entity / node, and it can give you that one URL, and it can give you metadata that gives you all the other information you need to know about what you can do here. Drupal is not doing that yet. Like you can't go to Node and say, hey, give me information about this content type, and have it list all of the different fields you can add to it. That's the goal. Like that's explicitly the goal with having something like HAL, is so that you can have this metadata that means that your API lives on its own, that you don't need people to go read a whole other set of documentation, that they just visit your API and it tells them what they can do with it.
So essentially it comes back with the equivalent of what we have right now with the form. It says you can give me a title, and here's the limits on the title, and you can give me an image, and you can give me a block of text here, and you can give me a numeric value here, and use these labels to tell me what those pieces are. So basically it's a spec, like a form.
Yeah, and that just brings it back full circle to what I was saying at the beginning, is this whole idea of RESTful web services is to make our web services work as well as the web does in the first place. You should be able to go to your web service, and just like when you go to a form that you're going to make a post request to, know all of these things. Yes?
Let's say you have a field in your content type. It's a select list, and values are 1, 2, and 3. But your post is actually sending the value 4, and that's not in that select list. How are the errors different of essentially you forgetting to fill out a required field versus you submitting data that is technically not allowed? I know the Form API has a lot of robust things saying, whoa, illegal operation.
Yeah.
How does this handle it?
It will give an error.
Is it something you can understand? And then
I mean, so another piece of the whole architecture of the web that I haven't talked about, but that's a big deal in REST, is that you get a response code back. So not only can you understand it because it should say something also, but like 404 is probably the response code you're most familiar with, the page not found. Like hopefully you do not get that when submitting a record, but that could be an error. But 302 is access denied. No, it's redirect. 30. Man. Anyhow, there's a new number, but it's very explicit. It's all defined. 410. I'm a teapot. All that stuff.
So you get something back that you can actually react to.
Yeah. And so.
Is there such thing as stale?
I'm sorry. I was in the so 300s are the user. The systems change something. The 403 is the user made an error. So 403 is denied. Does
this bypass FAPI? Because I know the whole stale form issues.
Yeah, well, no, that's so it doesn't use the form API. So yes, current ways of doing this in Drupal 7, say, okay, now that we've collected all of this data through these nice, beautifully machine-defined pieces, we are going to turn it into a form submission. And that works badly because the whole form submission process is based on user input and giving feedback to a human and not to a machine. And so there could be errors that never got back to the machine because they're it's trying to tell the user, hey, you're missing this title field. So I actually don't know how good it is telling you exactly what you did wrong. I don't think that's in yet, and I don't know that will be. It's something that one could add to the system, but I think that right now it's just it didn't work. It failed.
My biggest concern is because Form API has all the stuff for cross-site request forgery.
Yeah.
Is there anything built in here?
No, it's. I mean, it's sort of on a different layer. Like
Okay.
it's only taking information from here. Yeah, you're protected.
Provided your passport's not secret?
Yeah. Damn it! I knew I shouldn't have put that there. But on the permissions thing, on the get side, it honors all permissions. Like it does honor all of like Drupal's security things. And so if you haven't given anonymous people an ability to see a particular field, and you give anonymous people ability to see a node through JSON, it's not going to start showing them that field. It respects that permission. It's like it's not like added on to Drupal as an afterthought, which is another problem with 7.1s. Some of them, it understands all of Drupal's core things. So it handles the security, and it also handles the permissions on a field level as well as the node level. And as far as adding fields and permissions there, I don't know. That's edge case even in Drupal as it is. User reference are in core. I would have loved to see the relation module go in. It's a more powerful way of relating things, but node reference and user, the reference module in Drupal 7 took off, and so that's what's in Drupal 8 core. And so that that's what the extra links data is for. That's what Hal is going to do. Oh, so if you want to add an author for your node, create whether it's a user, it could be a user, or it could be another node type. It could be author. This is something that there isn't standards for even in Drupal, and so that's something that your API has to say. Well, you have to create that separately, and this is the link to do it. So this is how you add an image. This is how you add a taxonomy term. All of that's going to be, that's mostly the same way you can add tags really easily. Drupal's sort of going to handle taxonomy terms for you. But the old style where you have to go create the taxonomy term before you can add it to the node, that's what the links are for, and the underscore links are in HAL, and the additional media types and other information that's the metadata that is layered on top of the simple JSON structure.
So the metadata could be images, it could be other nodes.
Well, it's telling you how to relate these things. So when you create the file, you're going to some path, that's /entity or just /file. Like the file is a top level entity. If you're creating the user, that's you post request to user. But this is the kind of thing that there's no reason for you to know it when you're going to post the node. Like, you need to be told that these are the related resources. Like, I go to one resource, I want to post a domain, and the related resources are registrar, which is a separate content type. And so someone who's not me, who is not talked to me, could just send their requests to my API and get all of the information they need to know how to use it. And that's what HAL will do.
It's like that module where you can embed a form in a node form for a different content type.
Yeah.
It's all right in there.
Yeah, we're not going to make it as easy for machines as we make it for people. You probably have to go create each one separately. But yeah, that concept that you actually know what you have to create, because it's either linked or a subform is critical to being able to work with structured data, which is what Drupal excels at, and this takes it to a new level. It basically lets you take your structured data and expose it for a huge wide range of uses, which, again, if HAL can come through with the promise that we couldn't quite get with RDF, it'll let anybody do all kinds of cool stuff with your data. But even if that level of nirvana isn't reached, the ability for people who take the trouble to look into what you're doing, we'll be able to do really cool stuff with your data.
Thank you.
It was great, Ben. Thank you.
Not as prepared as I wanted to be.